Okay, we're live.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you? It's hot here.
Is it?
Yeah,
It's really cool here. It just
very
rained.
hot.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So today we've actually been meeting online about a subject. We're trying to put together a program, a reading program.
Uh-huh.
It's very targeted. We actually want to craft it for our young adult students that we have for edible education. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and So the reason we actually when we did the program, um, we noticed that their essay writing skills were not quite up to par. That's something that I certainly was concerned about because that is something they're on a pathway to go to college, and that is something
Yeah.
that you and I know that you have to actually get better and better. In fact, when I was at school in the UK, it was a driving topic of conversation that hey, it's going to be different when you get to college. You're going to It's a different way of interacting. You have to write at length. You have to be articulate in grasping ideas and so on and so forth. And then we had a little sort of investigation of the situation, and we asked them, uh, and then we actually discovered that they were not reading as much, certainly not as much as you and I have read it from childhood. And then I realized that this is something that I talked about with their the Soaya who runs the program, and said that this is something that we should think about in the future. And here we are. We're going to try and do that program for them. So we want to
Yep.
run a reading club kind of program.
Yep.
And so first of all, we're going to mechanics of it. Like, how do we run it? It's like we want to run it online. So there's actually some technical issues. We're going to use Google Classroom. And then there's also some positives to it because when you and I were kids, the books that we read, we were privileged to have access to them
Mm-hmm.
because
Physical books. Yeah.
uh, yeah, I mean, when
Physical
we were
books.
kids, my peers didn't have modern classics at home to read. It
Right.
was actually just a function of my family who were, English speaking and college educated and stuff like that. That it was
Yeah.
just something that was in the home. So that was not something that we had. And at least something that 50 years later, this is something that this refugee demographic also doesn't have
Yeah.
because their parents are blue collar workers. They're not
Yeah.
really. That's not inclination or culture or
Yeah.
habit.
Language even. Yeah.
Yes, language even.
I think they
Um,
speak it, but they don't. I don't think they can even read Bengali in for some of the parents.
yeah, they're probably.
Yeah.
I think there's a large percentage of them are illiterate. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, so but what since then we've also discovered that the difference nowadays is there's a lot of those books that we read as kids available for free online, and which is one of the reasons we wanted to craft this program because we can access a lot of these
Yeah.
books. When I say these books, I'm thinking of things like Call of the Wild or Wuthering Heights, Black Beauty, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which was the sort of the sort of things that we read as kids, and there's a multi-tier approach here because you want to we're teaching something body called literacy. So there's an eco part and there's a literacy part. So we also understand that the literacy part is actually not so great here either. So we want to improve vocabulary. We want to improve observation and articulation and ability to describe
Yeah.
and record and
Mm.
create memories and all that kind of stuff. So that is actually there is a kind of basic literacy involved that
Yeah.
we all, we are sort of really framing it within the context of general knowledge because we're not school,
Yeah.
we're not a formal educator, and we expect them to get a formal education in things like science and English and grammar and stuff like that. So we want this sort of soft skill thing, which is leans more towards general knowledge, and so our lens just happens to be nature, you know. So,
Yeah.
but on review of some of these classic pieces of literature, there's actually a lot of nature-based content
Yeah.
because they're set in the outdoors. They deal with wildlife and wolves and horses. Some of
Yeah.
them are set on a farm. Uh, I also like that they are comparative as well. Sometimes to know one thing, it's good to know another. So
Yeah.
that you're actually having a sense of comparison.
Yeah.
Um, and and then in the background, as you're reading, you're also improving your language skills. Your basic, your vocabulary, sentence
Yeah.
construction, paragraph construction, telling a story. This happens as you read more and more and more. Uh,
Mm.
that is the thing that we noticed about these young adults. They were very limited in their reading. That
Yeah.
maybe they could only name one or two books that they'd read at the age of 15, 16, 17. So we really want to get them onboard them onto this idea that this is not only something that helps them with language and literacy, which is a big
Yeah.
deal. In Malaysia, literacy is actually a problem, right? I've heard from Teach for Malaysia friends that there are kids who are in like 11, 12 years old and are literate in school. And we are supposed to be literate by 7 years old, right? In our first year.
Mm.
Standard one, you learn literacy, right? You learn
Mm.
now it's actually even before that. I mean, I learned before that because I went to like a kindergarten. So by the time I
Right.
got standard one, I could already read and write, which is not what my peers could do. And then we asked Shamala about this, who's the teacher.
Yeah.
She said that actually, yeah, they're expected to be literate in that standard one.
Yeah.
But they're finding that a lot of kids are slipping through the system, and we're discovering quite late that they're actually not literate. They actually can't read and write. You know?
Yeah, but some kids are also challenged by dyslexia and other things that are undiagnosed. So
That's true too. That's true
that as
too.
well.
Yeah. But the fact that they're slipping through the net is kind of problematic.
Yeah. Because I
Usually the
guess if you bring it back to the conversation about kindergarten as foundation education, where they assess, can the kid recognize the alphabet? Can the kid repeat? Are they following instructions? So kindergarten is kind of like the filter to check where you are, and then you get into standard one, and then you are prepared to embark on this, like, the next 15 years of learning. Standard
uh,
one to standard six, and then form one until form five. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I want to say that we are actually we're certainly nowhere near our kind of English proficiency as well as we were when I was a kid. People
I mean,
now.
I had two generations of adults around me who could speak English. Like both sides, my grandparents could speak English. My parents spoke English.
Yeah,
So English was a predominant language in our household.
yeah,
So in that sense, I would say English is my first language.
yeah.
Yeah.
Same here. Yeah, but it's not the case anymore, right? There are people here
Yeah.
that actually don't speak English at all,
Mm.
and are struggling. There's either very Mandarin. Uh, I find the Malay community speaks their English is a little better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
The
commonplace.
Mandarin community is definitely weaker. It's almost as if they don't want to and they don't need to, and they actually
So
stay very strongly within that language bubble. You
I
know,
think it's a subculture
It's kind of cultural. There
sustain.
is a cultural thing. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, and not to say that English is the best thing in the world, but
So yeah,
it does afford this ability to traverse various boundaries, right?
there's a lot of things in English. That
Yes. Yeah.
resources, reading material, which are my cat,
Yeah. I
not
know. I was like, what is that? Yeah. I
you know,
mean, that's the
it's
thing.
it's so easy.
Already, we're just
You
about to
can teach using like song. Yeah,
we're just about
it's
to talk
very
about
available.
how if we enter this territory of classic literature, we're going to be opening doors to a world of
Yeah,
knowledge. Because that's the other part of this. On the one hand, there's basic literacy and language skills and all that, but there's actually real knowledge when you read books. And
yeah,
reading books is, I find it sort of cumulative. You need to get into the habit and the practice of
yeah,
it, and that's when you start to develop an interest in it, and you're more interested. You'll start to think, "Oh, I like this author. I want to find more books by this author."
but it's the same like sports.
It's like what?
It's the same like sports. You know,
Okay,
PE teaches you all the different kind of activities you can do outdoors,
sure, sure.
and then you enjoy football and you play football and you watch football and you take different positions in football. So reading has a similar metaphor in the sense that you read because you have to get your assignments done in school, but then you read authors or you read themes or you read places or ideas, and then that brings you down a rabbit hole, which at some point you may go, okay, I'm bored of this, I want to like try something else, and it could be murder mystery, it could be adventure, it could be spirituality, it could be just how to say wanderlust. And I think, and that's where, like, even with we when we're talking to Shamala and Susan, uh humor was something that all of us had read, and
Yeah.
it wasn't like a whole book, it was just like in small articles or as part of a larger magazine, like section, so everybody reads the comics in the newspaper, and not really anywhere. However, what we are trying to design is to bring them to a certain level that allows them to appreciate the other levels around it. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because also, and let's start talking about some of the things that a reading program will help bring it
Yeah.
to their sort of consciousness, so to speak. One of them is actually nature and landscape. It's literally missing
Right.
modern day and contemporary culture.
Mm.
And this is the difference in classical works of literature. There a lot more of them are set somewhere. Like Wuthering Heights, it's actually set
Yeah.
on the moor, which I've had the chance to go and see, and I I could actually pull it out of my head and compare it. Do you know what I mean? Like what
Right.
was on paper,
Yeah.
it really when I actually
Yeah.
was there.
Immersive. It's more immersive when you
Yeah,
read it.
I'm not, and it
Knowing
really was like, oh wow, this is what I read. It was misty and foggy, and it looked really wild, and uh,
Mm.
so that's quite interesting. So this idea of nature and landscape and countryside is something that's actually missing now particularly for children, you know, because they're
Yeah.
trapped in very urban situations. They're trapped because they're also not allowed to. They don't have free reign to travel where they want to as well. So they're
But I
actually
feel the opportunity is like, again with Wuthering Heights, there are movies, So even if you've never been there
yeah,
yourself, you can
that's true,
watch
true,
movies
true.
that have been adapted to these stories and
Yeah.
kind of vicariously live through the characters in that way. So, or you may even come up with like, oh, what I read and what I watched is not the same thing, and then that becomes like a discussion and a different angle to reading. Yeah.
But don't you find modern day movies are so fantastical now that they're not real
Yes.
anymore? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I actually cannot go and watch a Marvel movie because I find the editing has become it's so fast paced. It doesn't even
But I think
feel
it's a Marvel thing.
yeah. But when you watch it,
Yeah.
it's like you can't relate. You can't relate to the pace of it. You can't relate to the sort of physicality. They're all they're mutants, and they're on alien planets or what. It's so fantastical
Yeah.
that hard to relate. It's hard to. It's not even like relating as someone living in the tropics and relating to a story set in the moors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
I
know.
think we were talking about this when we talked about Anne of Green Gables. I think
I don't
it's
remember that.
still
What's that
kind of
about?
it's about a young girl who is raised by somebody else, and she lives to learn to become a teacher. And I think although the pace is pretty much it's not a fast paced show or a book, it's a slow thing. It's describing her maturity from childhood to teenage years and young adulthood. So she's exploring these questions, her relationships with her friends and stuff like that. So I think it's something that it comes down to how we are curating the reading list.
Yes.
What we're
Yeah.
putting forward to the kids to explore.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, it's quite interesting. It just so happens that this demographic is unusual as well,
Yeah.
right? They're children of refugees, so there's some um, it's balanced a little bit differently. For example, there's more gender is more pronounced in that community, you know,
Mm,
among
yeah.
you know, and this is quite interesting to read a 18th, 19th century novel. It's almost the same gender dynamics.
Yeah. Yeah.
When
Gender
women
roles
were
are
not
quite fit.
allowed to do certain things.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. Uh, and then, so we're hoping to actually use it to what we want to do is actually teach them how concepts, how to understand concepts. For example, things like gender within
Mm,
this world. I think class is another one. That's another thing that you see in a lot of 19th century books. It's very
mm,
upstairs, downstairs kind of
yeah.
uh, uh,
Separations.
issues, which we
Yeah.
also see in modern life in different ways. So actually, it's an opportunity to talk about what is the modern situation with that.
Equivalent. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also things like race. Uh,
Mm,
we see racial issues um, in a very different way. Like is that- we talked about it the other day. Huckleberry Finn with the
yeah.
young space son, and then I was talking
Yeah.
about
So
how yeah
yeah. So with Huckleberry Finn, I feel like it is about the kid Huckleberry who is adopted by these women, right? And then his father comes to claim him. If not, they ask for ransom for him. Like once the ladies to pay him to have the son. If not, he'll sell the son to a slave. And so they end up selling their black slave to afford paying the father off for the son. So that's kind of where his murder ensues and the story builds on. So yeah, I feel like maybe they'll understand it because remember when we went the class, they didn't even understand what was it? Childhood was it a child labor. They didn't understand they
yeah
had no context of
yeah
child labor. So
yeah
for them to hear that someone's adopted this child and the parent wants to sell the child to the people, so these
yeah
concepts will be something that will be very comfortable, but also very freeing to them.
yeah
So I think that will be very interesting.
yeah, and there's race is something that we can also pick up on. For example, we one of the books that we know we're going to be doing is Jungle Book,
Yeah,
and the hero of the story Mowgli is Indian. So we want to
yeah,
have a conversation about Rudyard Kipling, who actually there is some controversy. He's considered a pro-colonist. He's pro-racist. So we
mhm,
also want to talk about understanding uh, the ethics of writers. Do you know what I mean? I think we
yeah,
have to get into the idea of how are we allowed to are we allowed to challenge some of the ideas being expressed if the viewpoint of the writer is
Yeah.
very, is very, is very pro, it's racist,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
uh,
guess it's like watching a movie. You watch the movie and then you
yeah,
can have a discussion for or against, you know, an idea that's been set forth. You don't
yeah,
have to consume it and accept everything as reality in its, entirety. So
yeah.
I think that brings up the critical thinking aspect of this process of reading, because not everything you read is how to say fiction, and not everything is non-fiction. And as we go through fiction and non-fiction, there is a blurring. Like, did it really
And
happen?
no,
Was it
that's
really
also something we
whatever?
want to teach is this understanding that it's there to be analyzed. We want to
Yeah.
pull it apart. And for example, Wuthering Heights is quite interesting because in the original book, although she doesn't harp on it too much, but she
Mm.
does describe Heathcliff as a Lascar.
Right.
And a
Right.
Lascar is generally a term used for a Bengali,
Right.
usually a Bengali or a gypsy, and they become sailors and join the maritime forces.
Right.
But
Right. Right.
the idea that he's actually a foreigner has
Yeah.
dissipated over the years. So, it's such a popular story that it's been made into, like, I don't know how many times it's been made, like, uh, what's that famous British actor was Cliff. Uh, and now we have Jacob Elordi, and they're white, you know?
Yeah.
He's supposed to be a
Yeah.
colored person.
Right. Right.
And that would have been kind of interesting to understand how the the social structure of that happens. A bit like,
Yeah.
have
The
you watched,
dramaturgy is not coming through.
like Bridgerton? Have you watched Bridgerton on Netflix?
I have. Yeah.
I mean, I thought that was a kind of very interesting because there were colored people in sort of high class strata because they
Mhm.
had married into it. There was like a black queen, I remember, and this is not something that you regularly see, although it's
Mm.
historically accurate. You know, I often think of like my Eurasian community being a bit like that in the 16th, 17th century. There'd be
Right.
like this white guy,
Mm.
who's the sailor that comes and he marries a freed slave who's from Mozambique, you know,
Right.
but she's very West. She's taken on Western credentials and Western culture. She's become a
Right.
Christian, so on and so forth. So that is something that we want to cover is this program. Is the idea that these stories contain complex ideas, you know,
Yeah.
that can be applicable to a modern world as well.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's also, some of these stories are time capsules. So you go into something of that period,
sure,
and you're,
yeah,
like a movie will probably not happen now, but back then it's highly probable. So these are things that so it's reading the book, it's also having the guided discussions,
yeah,
and a lot of these will also bring out, like, I guess, insights, what they take from it, what themes they like,
yeah.
how do they
In fact,
appreciate the reading process. Yeah.
we should say that this is actually a pioneer program, and that we also want to learn how
Yeah.
we are going to get challenged by their
Yeah.
response to it. I think that's going to be really interesting. Also, there are, like I said, they're unusual. They're young adults, but with a different. Um, they have a different. They live within a different demographic.
Yeah.
They're not exposed to kind of privileges that some. But then at the same time, there are there's richer kids that actually don't read either. You know, there's a
Yeah.
lot of modern day Malaysian kids that just don't value it at all.
Yeah. 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 But I
So
guess in our interest, we are designing it for these kids who will be going abroad to get their degree, and then in the case of them graduating, they get full citizenship in another country, and
yeah,
maybe reading will be their safe harbor, where
yeah.
they
So
find
let
themselves.
me talk about one of my pet, um, my pet pro things is the idea of storytelling. It's actually going to be really, really important. In fact, it is important now, and I see a lot of Malaysians not really understanding that is actually the building blocks of building a brand. You know, what I find is that people here, they tend to be marketeers. They're just trying to sell something and trying
Yeah.
to find a way uh, to sell more of something. They're just trying to get something and make money out of it, as
Right.
opposed to actually building a brand, which is the idea of crafting an idea into a product that has this
Right.
whole narrative and story that as it grows, it actually becomes more and more compelling. You know, it becomes a world of behavior and attitude and culture. I mean, if you think of like
Yeah.
Patagonia or
Yeah.
Nike, you know, it's about it's about a story of excellence and, you know, just do it, or about, do you know what I mean? And that is not, I don't see that being harnessed in enterprise. You know, enterprise is very much about just marketing, just trying to find ways to increase sales. And if that doesn't work, they'll just pivot, you know. Whereas you don't really see
Yeah.
that in a more progressive country. They will actually deal with the setbacks of a brand maybe not immediately taking off because they believe so strongly in it, you know.
Yeah.
And they continue to find the language or the concepts. Right? I mean, we see this now with AI. You know, when you hear about all the founders talk about it, you can actually see them trying to figure out what is the story of AI that they're selling. You know, you know, is it
Right.
about uh, is it about creating tools, or is it creating efficiency or ease for the human race? You know,
Right.
rather than the story of that they're going to be overwhelmed and have their jobs removed from them and stuff like that. So the branding of AI is actually quite important. So, but to be able to do that, you need to understand what is this, how to develop a story. You know, um, and then actually, I was just looking at a list that Susan sent me, and one of the books she recommended is "Around the World in 80 Days," which is one of my favorite books when I was a kid.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, that's a great one because the idea of like globalization, like actually moving across the world, across all these cultures, is our reality now, right? We really have
Yeah.
to navigate this very globalized world with lots of different ideas and cultures. And I sometimes think we're not doing a great job of understanding how to weight things. You know, this is important. This is not so
Well,
important.
what?
You know. Sorry.
To weigh things. Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of times that story is being told by a capitalist, is being told by someone trying to sell
Yeah.
you something. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
as opposed to like, what's the real story behind this?
Yeah.
Uh, it's like saying cashew nuts are delicious and they have all these fantastic properties and medicinal values and all this kind of stuff, but it masks the story of how women are getting their fingers burnt actually making the
From
cashew nuts
that.
from
Yeah.
the. Yeah, it's actually, so I don't buy cashew nuts because of it. It's inhumane, but when you mask over that story, you don't understand the full implications of your purchase. So that's another. I think that's something that we have to figure out how to put it into this thing. Is actually what gets erased, what gets kept in, and for example, like milk is another one, right? There's such a positive story about milk, how it's changed the human race. How we've become so much bigger, how we get such immediacy and nutritional value, but very little about the inhumanity of it. You know,
Yeah.
you have to keep a cow pregnant 8 times more a year than it would normally be. It would have, you have to put them through the suffering of having their calf taken away from them and then made pregnant again. This is horrible. So, unless you understand the fullness of stories, you are not able to make good decisions, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I think part of it is um when they read the books, right? It is also part of it is to explore what else the books are not showing, because the books can do certain things and then you
sure, sure.
curate a certain theme, and our theme is nature based. So if we are looking at landscapes, then, the question of how do landscapes connect? How do seasons change? So those would be the larger stories that they will then reflect upon as they are going through the what number of books that we are recommending for them. And for sure, I think issues like food production, it will come up because in terms of like Mowgli, he's eating fruits from the forest, right?
Sure.
And then, and he's eating based on what the animals are eating. So his variety could be skewed to a particular kind of animal. And, and with deforestation today, we know that in some cases, animals have to come out to villages to forage. So, it really depends on the discussions that we curate along with what they're reading. And I think vocabulary is another thing, right? There are maybe some words that come or some phrases that come from these classics that even for us, I think we would have to like do a little bit of research to find like why did they use those terminologies,
Actually, I have to go back and read some of these books. I think I've forgotten
Yeah.
them. You know. Actually, another interesting area is the characterization of animals. In a lot
Yeah.
of these conflicts, the animals actually have characters
Yeah.
and they have traits, and and that's actually something I like to use in when I've done workshops, um, because it actually creates empathy for the animal because you're starting to
Yeah.
relate to the animal.
Yeah.
Like I did one workshop with like
Personas.
a sort of a list of birds, and then they had a description of the birds, and one is like a very noisy, makes a lot of noise, you know, and eats a lot of crap, and then one is very beautiful and takes care of whatever. And I asked them to choose which one best reflects their own character.
Yeah.
And I think when you do that, I think it makes you empathize with that animal in a way, in that, oh, yeah, you actually, there's a similarity to you two, because that is actually a problem. Empathy is a problem in particularly with kids nowadays.
Yeah, and also listening to their friends' point of view raises empathy because then they get to know things about their friends that they would not typically, come across. So
Yeah,
then they will, oh, I have the same idea, and then the difference is it's not a standardized answer. Like in a
sure.
classroom where you're asking them to do a math problem, the answer will always be the answer. But when you're doing subjective things like reading and perspectives and points of view, it could be very unique to individuals and that could inspire somebody else to consider a different point of view because there's no right or wrong answer in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's all these parallels, like there's hierarchies in animals,
Yeah.
which reflect on human social hierarchy. So we can actually have a conversation about social hierarchies
Yeah.
and compare them. Um,
I think Jungle Book is perfect for that because you
it's
have
actually quite good
the
for that. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
orangutan like king, and then you've got all
Yeah.
his minions, and then you have like Bagheera, which has a very strong character. So
Sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And that is
So,
it's not fantasy either. I have three dogs, and there are three characters, three
yeah,
completely
and I think in terms of facilitating the learning, we could say like, okay, of all the characters in the Jungle Book, which one do you think was the most persuasive? Which one do you think was the wisest? Which one do you
yeah,
think had leadership values? So the way we facilitate the understanding could give them a lot of these uh, development elements
yeah.
that reflects on a nature-based, how to say, experience. So yeah,
There's also an interesting thing which is also missing a lot in modern life is the notion of wilderness, the notion of being wild. So that is
Mm.
actually when we're talking duration, we got to make sure that we cover this topic, because I think kids are not exposed to enough of the notion of something wild that
Yeah.
helps them understand about like a broad hierarchy of, you know,
Yeah.
of people.
Yeah.
Hey, we got people joining our chat
The
here. We
chat.
have Pascal saying very interesting conversation, even for a Frenchman, which is true. Yeah, um, yeah. So the interesting thing is, for some of these refugee children, they will probably have never even heard of some of these books.
Yeah.
And to think
Yeah.
that we read so many of them, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, but we'll have to go back and go over. What was the other thing I would say? The wilderness thing is also something that I struggle with when I'm developing workshops and stuff, because this understanding of wilderness is
Mm.
kind of difficult. It's always constructed in a very negative manner. It's actually something that you you know we don't want to interact with.
Yeah. I
Kids
think because
feel
it's
it.
an unknown. It's an unknown and it's risky, and
Yeah,
we are trying to be safe, and I think that's kind of where it becomes like negatively connotated. So yeah, but I think being conscious about, like, how to explore something carefully, I think that comes from exposure, and it comes back to when we talk about forest school. It's, you scale the exposure bit by bit. You offer them glimpse of challenges, because a lot of it is how to say, risk based learning. So in
yeah,
this aspect, because we are facilitating the reading,
yeah,
that consideration of what is a wild space, that
yeah,
can be, that can be something that they uh contrast against the memory. Because I remember one of the students, she was saying that her brothers will collect the seedlings from the forest,
right.
and she doesn't go because it's considered unsafe. So, we could draw back into the conversation these personal anecdotes to expand the description of wilderness and, wild spaces. Yeah. Yeah. Because, like, even the sea is wild. It's just that we're looking at
Sure,
it from the
sure,
perspective
yeah,
of sitting on a boat,
yeah.
but come wave and tide, monsoon, the sea becomes wild.
Well,
So,
as a kid, I lived on Jalan Skudai, and
yeah.
I didn't go every day, but every few days, an adult would take me to cross the street. And there was a beach, not a nice beach, but it was a beach that was alive with things. So there was like
Right.
things climbing up the walls. There was hermit
Yeah.
crab. There was, what is the
Yeah.
one with the crab with the one big hand? Is digging
The
holes.
fiddler crab.
There's land crabs. So I was exposed to wild things
Yeah.
living in their wild homes in a wild situation, which I
Yeah.
don't see a lot of modern kids having the ability to experience. You know,
Right.
in fact, their world is actually becoming more and more cut off. They're
Yeah.
living in air conditioning and malls. They struggle with being in for the shortest time outdoors. It will be an interesting area to sort of explore. I think these kids are a little bit different because uh, some of them have some memory of, because some of them what came from Myanmar, right? So
Yeah.
they might have very, very, very limited memory of living in a much more rural agricultural type situation. Even now, they tend to live in quite kampong, quite areas, so they're seeing a little bit more. Their parents are certainly like my gardener. He goes fishing, catches fish to eat.
Right.
You know, he's always trying to grow something in my garden. And I keep telling him, no, don't do it because we're in the business of growing things. I don't want to be growing. vegetables. I'd rather pay you to go buy them. But he will sneak in something somewhere. So they're a little bit more connected to nature, but it's something that we need to craft a way to talk uh, about.
Right.
Um, I think also the idea of language might be quite interesting because we're challenged in a globalized world with different languages, but we're also challenged with different cultural situations as well, which we're going to see in the books. We're going to see 19th century Victorian values,
Yeah.
uh, and some of the stories are about a reaction to those things, right?
Yeah.
They're going to describe the freedom of being an animal, or
Yeah.
you know, like Call of the Wild is a very interesting sort of about taming and uh, survival and stuff like that. That's kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
I wonder how we sort of talked about this, but I wonder how successful it will be because we can't make them. I mean, we kind of make them read, but we cannot really make them enjoy reading. That is something that we all we can do is like just open the gate and sort
Yeah.
of herd them along the path a little bit, and then hopefully, is that what happened to you? Because that's what happened to me. It started, and I was like, I don't know if I really liked it. But then I did really like it, and then I became a voracious reader as a young kid. So
Mm.
that's our experience.
I I think we always had books around. There was always books around. My parents would read to us when we were younger.
Yeah.
So it was always about like, okay, what's next? What's next?
Oh, really? Okay. So
Who's the
you read
character
with
today?
your parents? You read with your
Yeah,
parents?
when I was really young, my parents would read us nighttime stories. So like
Oh,
some of the story, I mean, we never get through the whole book like in one sitting. So you read like maybe a couple of pages, then you have to wait for tomorrow, and then you have to wait for tomorrow for the next, and then you finally get to the end of the book, and then you have to recall what happened in the beginning. Where did he go? How did Sinbad survive that? Oh, okay, it was the eagles, right? So you'd have that kind of read through, and then as you get older, then you read, and then like I read, my brothers would listen to it, but my parents would sit and like correct me if I got it wrong. So yeah, then I just read different books, and most of it were borrowed, or borrowed from friends, shared by cousins. Yeah. So yeah.
okay. I had a very different situation. I never read as my parents. Uh,
Right.
maybe they were more like uh my grandparents would say, "Did you read something today?" Like because it was
Right.
books, right? It's like, "Did you read something this afternoon?" And then you'd say,
Right.
"Yes."
Right. Right.
But they didn't participate in the thing, and it was very much a personal journey of mine. And then I think when I was about 14, I my mom has a degree in history, and I think one of her majors was English, and she had a box of books, and I found it when I was 14, her
Right.
university textbooks, and I remember reading Hemingway. I mean, Hemingway is one of them. I think it was a little precocious, for me to be reading that then, but I was hooked. After that, I became a very uh, pronounced reader because the stories. I mean, it was the stories of the world at large. I remember the first book was Hemingway's A Movable Feast, which
Okay.
is about him as a young American man going to
Mm.
Paris and discovering this incredible free society of
Right.
thinkers, creators, and it blew me away. And that was
Yeah.
the thing that really made me think, oh, the world is out there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's it's not what is being described to me here.
Yeah. It's
There,
not what you see. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I think for me, when I was maybe 11 or 12, a lot of the
yeah,
girls in my school were reading this series about these twin sisters called Sweet Valley High or
yeah.
Sweet Valley Twins. And so because everyone who read the book would talk about the book. So if you didn't read the book, you wouldn't know what the conversation was about. So in some ways, it would influence us to all kind of read the book and share. So somebody will
So
buy a
what
few
did
volumes.
you read? Because you're quite unusual. You're a little bit nerdy. not very
I mean, I
girly.
read the Sweet Valley
Huh?
series because it was Friends, but I read everything. I read the Goosebumps. I read, Fantastic Five. I read,
Oh, I love that. I loved all that. I
I
read
read
all of that. Fantastic Five and
quite a
Secret
lot. Yeah,
Seven, things like that. I mean, that is actually very nature based because they were always having adventures
outside.
in the forest.
Yeah,
It's like this
yeah, yeah,
world of
yeah,
outside. You know,
yeah.
it's
I
something that.
remember my uncle had Rin Tin Tin magazines, and yeah, even those were like really fun because he was always on an adventure somewhere. Yeah,
Um.
yeah. Encyclopedias we had.
So, one interesting thing about this modern world that we are going to access is you cannot read these books online for free. So, I was saying to you earlier that our peers, when we were children, our peers had
Yeah,
no access to these books. It was we were privileged because our parents bought had those books in the house or bought those books for us. Um,
right.
Now it's available. It's online. It's free, and not only that, the we're going to introduce them to an app called Fabuli, which is where it is an audio book and text. So it will highlight the
Yeah,
text while there's a spoken word. So it's actually you are learning how words are pronounced properly as well.
yeah,
Uh, Maybe you also understand rhythm of language and how the story is being put together a little bit better. So it's actually a little bit better, you know.
yeah,
The limitation, of course, is the fact that we have to choose from even though it's pretty big, we have to choose from a public domain, books that are in the public domain, which are copyright free, you know.
yeah,
So, like I said, like we've talked about it before, it's really quite a big list.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And we're going to be able to curate, once we figure out a sort of a plan of what are the values we want to teach within this year, and then
yeah,
we sort the books to those things. But having said that, we also want to use this as uh, a jumping board for more programs like this, which don't just rely on public domain books. That means it'll be more like a book club. That means we can open out to adults who can afford to buy maybe a book to read around a subject, And
right.
I know you and we've read some great books in our lifetime about nature. Maybe
Yeah,
that does lean a little bit more into,
yeah,
like Silent Spring and
yeah,
uh, Walden by Thoreau and stuff like that. And
yeah,
so we kind of we started this program that is very targeted and with a very a point of view, but we also want to move into different different sections. I think let's think about who we want to talk about. I think there are a lot of Malaysian kids that are not very literate. They're not reading very many books.
mm.
Even though they can well afford to, they're just not doing it. There's no interest in it, or there's no encouragement in it. There's no
I
culture
think
of
it's
it.
also the time that they're living in because it's so distracting. You have video games, you have your phone,
That's true
you have
too.
music. Before for us, music was you have to buy a cassette. Buying a book versus buying a
True.
cassette. A
Yeah,
book could have been more affordable than a cassette
yeah.
or a CD.
Actually, that raises the point
So
as well because we also have movies, which makes books kind of archaic.
yeah,
Like Walking Heights is like a movie. Frankenstein is a movie that I kind of watched and enjoyed on Netflix.
right. You watch
But
it,
it's a
Frankenstein.
very different experience from reading it and having your imagination sort of
Yeah,
roused by it. So yeah,
I don't
so
know.
we do want to open it out, and then we also want to. The other thing that we want to do is we actually want to figure out how we do this remotely because we also want to figure out how we run programs
And yeah,
this online successfully. We don't want it to be just like this very cold sort of perfunctory thing. It's got to be engaging. We got
Yeah.
to craft it in a way that makes it interesting. But I do know that things like reading and book clubs are also have a new life in this
Yeah.
modern age. You know, people are enjoying new things. Uh, they're also enjoying the social part of reading. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is maybe that whole heated rivalry thing. I see that there's a really interesting social element to it. You
Right.
know, there are sort of dance clubs around the thing. They're reading the books.
Really. But like it started off as a book that turned into a show, right?
Yeah,
And so, do you think
but it was a few
that
years
people are
old. The
still
book was a few years old. Yeah,
so are people still reading the book, or have they all just jumped on?
the books have now sold 300% more than their sales 6 years ago because of the show.
Oh, so they've got new reader
Yeah,
audience. Nice.
he has now committed to a new one of the series.
Right.
So it's very interesting what it's doing to. Uh, but there's a secret sauce to it as well, which I don't quite understand what it is, but why people are so captured by this story and that they want more of it. They want more about the characters.
I guess the tension, I, mm, I don't know. I've not read the book. I've seen the show, but
Yeah.
like I'm curious how the conflict of being rivals but liking each other.
So,
I'm curious how that translates in writing, because a lot of it will be monologue by themselves, right? But
well,
then,
that's actually one of the big differences. In the books, it's
yeah,
very internal because you
yeah,
can. It's written, right? So
yeah,
she wrote all about the internal mechanics.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So when it came to the show, the screenwriter
yeah. Had to
had to
externalize
put
all
it
of that conversation.
into conversation, into text. So there are
Yeah,
actually things in the show that are not in the books because there's no other way to explain it otherwise. Otherwise, you just have a lot of
yeah,
what's the word for it? Like a narrative over the thing, which
yeah, yeah, yeah.
is not so
So I
great.
guess that's another interesting thing that if the kids were to watch, they read Jungle Book, for instance, right? And then
Yeah,
they go watch the movie Jungle Book, or read Tarzan, and then watch the movie Tarzan or watch the
I
cartoon
wonder that
Tarzan.
should be our strategies. We want to find a few books that they can go and watch the movie,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And then
yeah, yeah,
we can have a comparison kind of
yeah.
a thing. Yeah, I think that
And
could
and
work.
I guess if we want to bring it into a meta conversation, it could also be like, so this author writes these types of stories. What do you think inspired him? And I think that was another conversation we had about a lot of these books tend to be uh, written by men, and there are not many that are written by women, and that's a condition
Oh,
of its time.
that's an interesting topic as
You
well.
know, yeah. And we talked about Moby Dick being very masculine, and Beatrix Potter and how she wrote her stories. Yeah, so y- I would say that this program that we're starting is just the beginning, and I'm sure once we run one cycle of it, we will have very unique insights to how we would do the second
Yeah,
one, and how we would like scale it for a different audience. Um, yeah, because even the book list seems to be quite hard to pin down because there's just so many good things to read. Yeah,
yeah. What I you know I barely read now. What about you? I I I
I
read a
don't read
lot of
like novels.
academic
Yeah, for sure.
papers.
I read
I'm more
articles.
Yeah, me too. I read articles, academic papers, opinion pieces. I spend a lot of time and quite
Yeah,
challenging, but I struggle with just like a novel or you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I don't know if it's
yeah,
because I find it hard to get into that sort of headspace now of just immersing myself in a different world like that.
For me, like if I were to read a novel, I have this thing about like I just want to read it at cover, cover to cover, like stop to eat and then
Right.
go back to reading it. It's yeah, I really don't like reading it halfway and then doing like 20 other things and then coming back to it like 2 days later. Yeah, I like to read it cover to cover as fast as I can. So, but that's just me.
I remember recently there was on Netflix, there was a dramatization of that Marquez book, that sort of super magical. And I remember it almost as one of the last books I read, and I read it all
Right.
night. I was so thing on, which is something I want to ask you. What about these sort of very fantastical worlds? Is that a way for us to understand nature as well? Because they're just alternative worlds, you know.
I mean, really, at the end of the day, you can make meaning out of anything. Like I
Sure,
remember
that's true. That's
Zen and the
true.
Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And
Sure.
basically
Yeah.
he's going on a bike ride, yeah?
Yeah.
And he's talking about the landscape, he's talking about carnivals, he's talking about people behavior.
Yeah.
You read Sophie's World, and
Yeah.
Sophie's World talks about philosophy, but really she's talking about the place. You
Yeah.
read what's his name? Fight Club. And Fight Club's really talking about people's behavior
Yeah.
and how he's actually talking about himself. And then as you get to the point where you realize, hey, there's one guy and he's talking with himself.
Right.
And then you watch the movie with Brad Pitt and you go like, oh fuck, I totally missed that. And then you go back, you read the book again, and you go like, oh, so sometimes when you're reading it for the first time, you may not get everything out of it, and then you go back and you read it again and you are at a different place in your life as well. And you read different values out of it. So I feel like, yeah, I have some books that I've read multiple times, and it's always nice to read it, and it's familiar. You don't remember it word for word. I don't, at least, but I kind of like, oh, I know this is getting to that point, and I'm looking forward to how the story unfolds. Although I kind of know what happens, but yeah, I do sometimes read the same books twice. Yeah,
Actually, on that point is we also have to craft a way of helping them analyze, review, and communicate their understanding of the book. So we're gonna have to
yeah.
develop a sort of which isn't too
I kind of made a bit of a
like
worksheet for them.
yeah,
So it kind of has like which is your favorite character? What was the interesting point in the story for you? And then I have like you agree with the ending, because it depends on the story, right? Sometimes the ending is very ultimate, and sometimes the ending is very open ended, and sometimes the what is the lesson you learn out of this book? So yeah, I think we can make some activity worksheet for them to like track the reading, and I
yeah.
think that would be quite interesting to read for us in terms of the variety of the kids that we're working with and what they got out of it. Because if in the beginning the lesson will be a bit more assisted reading, so we have an audio book being read and they're putting through the thing and they can read it on their own later. Uh, it was the words that they learned that was different and or pronunciations, So yeah, I mean we can weave all of that into place.
I recently read this great article about it's written by a Japanese doctor based in Okinawa, and
Mhm.
he was writing. I have to send you some links. There's some quite interesting things that he's talking about. One of them is actually how your health improves when your life has more meaning,
Yeah,
and then he was talking about this Japanese concept called not ikigawa or something.
ikigai.
Ikigai.
Ah,
Okay. So, but it's the term has been hijacked by a Western idea. Ikigai is about,
it's
there's a
been
famous
simplified. It's been oversimplified.
and there's a Venn diagram which actually includes your career, things you love, things you do, that. And he says
Yeah.
actually in the real Japanese understanding of it, it has nothing to do with career. It is
Yeah.
actually just about a kind of a savoring of life, just stopping to savor life. And it is that savoring, spending that little is what gives you meaning. That means it tells your brain is telling your body you have a reason to live because you're
Yeah.
enjoying this moment.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That was really powerful because I've been, I've been doing on my other Substack. I've been writing this thing about gardening and landscapes and stuff like that. And I've never truly, I don't really understand why I do it. I just do it.
Right.
I'm actually wanting to do small movies that capture that moment.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
I've been struggling with this digital world that keeps robbing me of them because I will make it. I'll put it on this platform. The platform closes down, and I lose that film.
Ah, yes.
Okay, so I recently been like, okay, I'm going to go back and find the file, reconstruct it, and put them on my Substack so that I've
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
back again. And I've actually been trying to figure out why am I doing this? Why does it feel it matters to capture this 3-minute film about me
It's like a time
looking?
capsule of your memory.
But it's actually just like a feeling. I just wanted to capture a feeling of
Yeah. Yeah.
watching
Yeah.
the
Because you're
water
feeling it, we can
shimmer.
see it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's ikigai. That is what he's saying, and
Yeah.
I've never seen it articulated like that. And I was like, okay, now I know why I'm doing this.
It's the same thing. You know how the Japanese. So all of this is part of Bushido, and there's another word called. Again, it's savoring the value of something. So, you know how in the 90s they made these like robotic pets, so still dogs that went around
Yes,
and they'll
yes.
like play with you and they'll like bow and they'll like respond by barking and they'll ask for food and you pet
Have you
them and
seen the
stuff.
new ones? Have you seen the new ones? Holy
No, I
shit!
haven't.
Oh my god, they're
So,
scary real.
in the context of Muntanine, these anything in Japan that has lived with you for a long time, that has served you a purpose, that you use almost every day, typically they believe will have a spirit, a being, because it's part of your life. And when it ceases to work, uh, they will thank the item and they will put it to rest, and that's kind of how the Marie Kondo um does it spark joy. It kind of comes from that Mota 9 like value. And so sometimes they even do like funerals for these like digital toys because
Yeah, 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 yeah,
that
yeah,
pet
yeah. I
has
read
died,
about your
so
Tamagotchi. Yeah,
yeah, so Montanine is about appreciation of this thing that is in your life. So you
yeah.
use it to its fullest value and you don't just discard it because it's no longer pretty or.
Oh.
So that there is a lot. Montanine is more complex than what they say about don't be wasteful. It's beyond that. It's a philosophy. So yeah, it's very
Okay,
interesting.
so we'll just end on that note. In that there's also about the mystical and the spiritual as well in these books.
Correct.
That is also part and parcel of our experience, our lived
Yeah.
experience, our living with animals, living with nature, all that kind
Yeah,
of
I mean,
stuff.
if we eventually read like The Last of the Mohicans,
Yeah,
they will really have a sense of like identity and place and
yeah,
fight. And
yeah.
yeah.
I'm waiting there. One of my favorite authors is Michael Pollan. So I do read
Mhm.
nonfiction. I'm more interested in reading nonfiction. So Michael Pollan is one of my favorite writers who wrote The Omnivore's Dilemma. So he's written a new book called About Consciousness, which I think is really interesting because he has this eerie way to write a book at the moment. It has incredible relevance because he's
Yeah.
conscious. The context is AI. You know,
Right.
Consciousness is a very interesting factor when we're actually evaluating AI, our human consciousness and the lack of consciousness within that. So that's quite an interesting angle. Um, he kind of lost me at his last book. He wrote about psychedelics. I felt he
Okay.
sort of went down a path that I was really not that interested in.
Right.
But weirdly enough, I just watched him do this interview. He said actually he had to go down that path is what triggered his interest in consciousness because
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what
To
I mean?
be less conscious and to
Yeah,
be taken on a journey is
yeah,
different from
yeah,
embarking on the journey.
yeah.
So
So
yeah, it's the
now
two ends of the same thing.
I think this is a very interesting because consciousness is also linked into meaning as well. You know, what is the meaning? Of your existence and stuff like that. So I think that's a whole pod. I think we'll when his book comes out, we'll maybe reread it and take a look at that. Okay,
Yeah.
so hey, we got to go back and read some books. Holy crap!
Yes. I think yeah, I'm looking forward to reading some of these things again.
Yeah, in
I
a way,
don't
I'm
know
looking
if I
forward
have
to.
my copies.
It's sort of forcing me to do it, which I would probably wouldn't do it if it was
I'm
left to
just
me.
dreading reading it digitally. I'm so used to physical
Oh,
books.
really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm so used to reading on my phone now that I don't get it. In fact, what I'm
Right.
now trying to accustom myself is to listening to the book, which is also
Right.
good. But there's also
Yeah.
some challenges. You can fade in and out of, like being,
Awareness.
yeah, being sort of really in tune with it. But it's also, like they actually, there are apps that will speed it up just a little so you can actually take in more, which
Yeah.
I don't know, weird to me. But yeah.
I think if
Okay.
you read if you do stuff on like YouTube for sure, YouTube can speed up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So we're gonna meet on this next week on Tuesday. So send me your list.
Okay.
I've got a short list from both Shamala and Susan. So send
Okay.
me a list. I'll put it on a spreadsheet and we'll start to curate the list. All right.
Okay. All right.
Good talking.
Bye.